Boldwood presents Blood Brothers, written by Heather Atkinson and read by Angus King. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. "Would you look at that?" said Pete, gesturing to the night sky with his can of lager, slopping it everywhere.
Watch it, you arsehole,"
grumbled Stevie.
"Look what you've done to my tracky top."
"Oh, aye. Sorry about that, pal. But would you look at that?"
"Look at what?"
said Stevie, ineffectually swiping at his sleeve in a vain attempt to dry it.
"The stars."
"What about them?"
"Well, they're so fucking sparkly."
He waved his arms with such enthusiasm, he almost fell off the garden wall he was perched on.
"Aye so?"
"They're bloody beautiful."
He scowled at his friend when he realised he was more concerned with his damp sleeve than the celestial bodies.
"Aye, you're no even looking."
"Because I'm trying to dry my sleeve."
"Are you still banging on about your shitey top? I'm sick of hearing about it."
"Keely only bought it for me yesterday. She'll fucking kill me."
"If she gives you any snash, tell her to shut her fat hole."
"Oh, aye. Like I'd do that. Do you think I've got a death wish? But don't worry. I'll be sure to tell her it was your fault."
Pete swallowed hard at the prospect of being in that harridan's bad books.
"Blame it on one of the Waynes. She'll no murder them."
"No, she'll grind my tackle into the dust instead for giving her them. She's always blaming me for them being wee bastards."
"You want to put your foot down with that one, pal? You sound like a right fucking poof."
Stevie slammed his can of lager down on the pavement so forcefully he slopped more of it over himself.
"That's it, you prick. No one calls me a fucking poof. Stand up so I can give you a severe doing."
The front door of the house opposite opened, casting light onto the litter-strewn pavement.
"Keep the fucking noise down, you daubers!"
yelled a tall, stocky man in a beige dressing gown.
"Unlike you lazy sods, I have to get up for work in the morning."
Pete and Stevie turned their antagonism off each other and onto him.
"Oh, aye," said Pete. "You wanting some, big man?"
"I'll smash into the fucking tarmac, Pete Williamson. Everyone around here is sick of you. Ow!"
A noise down the road drew all their attention. The man in the dressing gown took one look at the approaching chaos and ran back inside as quickly as his slippers would allow, slamming the door shut behind him. Pete and Stevie turned to look as a gang of youths tumbled towards them amid punches, kicks and cries of pain. Picking up their cans of lager, they stepped over the small garden wall, which barely came up to their knees, as though it could protect them from the carnage. Out of the 10 men, whose ages ranged from late teens to early 20s, 4 were gaining the upper hand, either sending their opponents running or knocking them to the ground. They'd formed a circle in the melee, standing back to back so no one could sneak up on them. Eventually, their opponents realised they weren't going to win and fled, dragging their injured friends along with them. The night air became still once more, only the sound of running footsteps audible. Pete and Stevie swallowed hard when the 4 men turned to look their way. "Pete, is that you?" said one of the men, jogging up to him while the other 3 remained where they were, standing in the middle of the road.
"Aye, it's me, Jamie. How are you?"
"I'm no bad, thanks. Looks like you've been wiring into the lager again," he replied. Jamie was young, in his early 20s, but his eyes, which were hard obsidian flints, said he'd already lived a lifetime. His frame was tall and wiry, but he was renowned on the estate for his physical strength. Jamie's face would have been handsome, with sharp cheekbones, aquiline nose and full lips, had his gaze not been so full of threat. From his right hand dangled a thick bike chain, the blood dripping from it visible in the light cast from the street lamp. "You must be good and pissed, Pete," he added. "That'll affect your memory." "Aye, it does. Every time. I'll wake up in the morning and I won't remember a thing about tonight." Jamie nodded and turned his intimidating gaze on Stevie, who took a step back. "Does it affect your memory too?"
"Every time,"
Stevie hastened to assure him.
"I was on the vodka earlier and that always goes straight to my eyes. I can't even see who I'm talking to right now. You're just a blur."
"Good," he replied in a calm voice. Jamie glanced back over his shoulder at his three friends, who were watching. Stevie noted how their knuckles were stained with blood. When his three friends nodded, Jamie looked back at Pete and Stevie. "You should go home. It's supposed to rain tonight." "Is it?" said Pete. "I didn't know that. Thanks for the warning, pal." With one hard nod, Jamie returned to his friends, and the four of them casually sauntered off down the street. Only when they'd turned the corner and vanished from view did Stevie release the breath he'd been holding.
"Thank God for that. Right, I'm off home."
"What will Keely say about your top?"
"I don't care. Even she's less scary than the Blood Brothers,"
he called back, before jogging off in the opposite direction to which the four youths had gone. "Poof," Pete muttered under his breath, before hastily unlocking his front door, stepping inside and slamming it shut behind him. Jamie smiled as he listened to his friends eagerly discussing their latest fight.
"Did you see me stick the heat on Finn Atkins?"
grinned Gary, the most rotund of their group, his mop of blonde hair flopping into his blue eyes, which were deep set into a permanently flushed face.
"A wanker with a wanky name."
"Aye, he broke like a blade of grass,"
laughed Digger, who'd earned his nickname by working out incessantly until he was the size and strength of one of the machines.
"Did you see me flip over Davy Saunders? He proper shite his pants."
"I'm no surprised," said Logan, the fourth member of their group. Tall and athletic with curly light brown hair, he was the quietest of their band, and preferred to think a move through before making it, while the other three charged in headlong with little thought for the consequences. Logan's cool head had stopped them from making plenty of daft mistakes in the past when inexperience and the invincibility of youth won out over common sense. Out of his three best friends, Logan was the one Jamie admired the most. "What do you think, Jamie?" said Logan. "Do you think we saw off the Lawsons permanently?"
"Probably not, but we took them out of action for a while, especially after Digger threw John Lawson into his younger brother."
Digger grinned and flexed his muscles.
"That's the last time those wee fuds will call me a steroid-pumped donkey."
"They will be back," glowered Jamie. "But we just gave ourselves some breathing space." The Blood Brothers, as their group was known locally, turned the corner onto a darker street, passing rows of small new-build houses, each with a strip of grass out front and a freshly painted fence. The shiny new veneer was thin, though, because all the litter and broken-down furniture that had graced the gardens of the old houses had once again congregated outside the new. "I wish I was in one of these," said Logan, wistfully.
"No, you don't,"
muttered Gary.
"You can't keep the heat in, and the pipes keep getting blocked. They're fucking bodge jobs."
"At least everything's all new. Not like our old place."
"Your place might be old, but everything works. My gran got water fired straight up her when she used the kludgy in a backfired. It's not fucking funny,"
he added, when they all doubled over with laughter.
She was in hospital for 2 days with shock. Aye, it is, grinned Digger, wiping away tears of laughter. I'll do that cranky old cow some good. Keep the noise down, Jamie told them. We don't want anyone looking out their windows and seeing us after the Lawsons have just been attacked. No one around here would grass to the police, said Gary. You never know. Just take it easy. They all quietened down at his word. Jamie was the undoubted leader of their group. He always had been, ever since they were little children battling the bullies at school. He'd safely steered them through some choppy waters, so they always knew he was talking sense. Gary was the first to leave, saying good night before quietly entering his house. Digger, who lived just around the corner, was next, although his house was in the older section of the scheme. At the bottom of Digger's Road, Jamie and Logan turned left onto the next street, and the latter sighed. What is it? Said Jamie. My dad's still up, he muttered, indicating the light on in the downstairs living room. So? He'll want to know how we got on with the Lawsons. So what? You can tell him we kicked their heads in. It's never that simple. He'll want every little detail, and he'll find something to bitch about. He always does. Want me to come in with you? We can take his shite together. Aye. Thanks, Jamie. No worries. Come on. Logan opened the door, and they stepped inside the small, stuffy house. Logan's house, like Digger's and Jamie's, was one of the original houses on the scheme, built in the 50s, every room pokey. At least they were easier to heat than the new houses. Dave McVitie sat in the armchair in front of the telly, a can of lager in one hand, the remote control for the television in the other. A plate of biscuits was perched on his belly, so pendulous it resembled a shelf when he sat down. "All right, son," he said when they walked in, his eyes glued to the television. "Did you have a good evening?" "No bad. We beat the Lawsons." "Really?" He beamed, finally deigning to drag his eyes off the telly and onto them. "Aye." Logan glanced at Jamie, who nodded encouragingly. Dave listened, enraptured, as his son related every detail of the fight. When Logan finally reached the end of his tale, Dave leaned back in his chair, lost in thought. Jamie glanced questioningly at Logan, who shrugged. "You did good, boys," Dave eventually said, making this pronouncement as though he were a general praising his troops. "If you don't defend your turf, all the wee cockroaches will start taking the piss. You have to stomp on them before they infest the whole fucking scheme." "There were more of them this time," said Jamie. 7 to our 4. "And next time, they'll come in an even bigger pack." "They won't come back, not after the kicking we gave them." "They'll be back, mark my words." Jamie and Logan glanced at each other. "Right," said Jamie, breaking the silence. "I'll be off." "Why don't you stay for a drink?" said Dave, picking up an unopened can of lager off the floor and holding it out to him. "Celebrate your victory." "I can't. My ma will go apeshit if I'm late." "Jackie's still fighting the world, is she?" "She always will. She enjoys it." Knowing filled his dark eyes. "And she always wins." Dave cleared his throat, jowly face turning red. He'd gone up against Jackie Grace several times and lost. "Go on, get off then before she spanks your wee arse." "See you later," said Jamie as he left, glancing at his friend, amusement dancing in both their eyes. Dave didn't speak until Jamie had gone. "Did you get it, boy?" he asked his son. "Aye, I did," replied Logan, pulling a phone out of his jeans pocket and holding it out to him. Dave snatched it from him with sweaty hands. "From John Lawson?" Logan nodded. "Aye." "And your friends know nothing about it?" "Nothing. Not even Jamie." Dave swiped at the screen, smearing grease from the crisps he'd been eating across it. "I hate these bastard things. I can never work them," he muttered, thrusting the phone back at his son. Logan took the phone from him, jabbed at the screen, and sighed. "It needs a passcode to unlock it." "Oh, that's fucking marvellous. All the information we need to finally get out of this shithole is on that phone, and we can't even get to it." "Leave it with me. I know someone who might be able to help. I really think we should bring Jamie and the others in on this, though." "No," snapped Dave. "That's just more people to share the proceeds with. We keep this to ourselves. Do you understand, boy?" Logan sighed and nodded. "Good. Now stick some grub on. I'm starving." "It's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm knackered." "Then get on with it so you can piss off to bed. And don't burn the bloody bacon," Dave called after him as he slunk into the tiny kitchen, which was nothing more than a worktop lining one wall, with a fridge and a cooker on the other. After his mother had died 4 years ago, Logan had shouldered the burden of the majority of the cooking and cleaning, usually because his dad was too bone idle, although he did sometimes cook if he wanted a curry. The one time Logan had made curry, he'd purposefully put far too much chili powder in it, and his dad had spent the rest of the day glued to the toilet. He shut the door behind him and stared at the phone in his hands. It was tempting to smash it to bits. He had the feeling it was only going to cause even more trouble than they already had to deal with on a daily basis, but his dad had the scent of easy cash in his nostrils, and from experience, Logan knew he would never let it go. If only his dad hadn't gone drinking down the pub and learnt about a robbery with a big payoff the Lawsons were planning. He had the horrible feeling they were way out of their depth. The streets of Gallowburn were never silent, no matter the time of day or night. Whether it was a dog barking, a drunk singing out of tune, or bored Ned smashing windows, there was always noise. Jamie passed a house where a couple screamed at each other so loudly it was audible on the street. There was a loud smash, followed by the man's yells. Jamie continued on his way. This was an everyday occurrence here, all part of the endless Gallowburn symphony. In the older part of the estate, the lighting was poor, vandals having smashed the majority of the streetlights. Every time the council repaired them, they were broken again almost immediately, so they'd given up, deciding to give the residents what they wanted, which seemed to be darkness. Glancing up an alley, he saw 2 shadowy figures, which melded into the night when they realised they'd been spotted. Drug dealing was rife on the estate, mainly with the young men who had nothing better to do, stuffing what little money they had up their nose or injecting it into their veins. He passed rows of squat, pebble-dashed houses, each with a long spit of garden leading from the front door to the decaying fence. Some of the residents took pride in their homes, their gardens neat, adorned with flower baskets and gnomes and, in one case that had become the local joke, a fountain in the shape of a life-size Grecian woman holding an urn spurting water. The rest of the gardens contained broken plastic slides, cockeyed trampolines, and weeds so high the local cats vanished when they jumped into them. Jamie slid his hand inside his jacket, fingers closing around the bike chain. They'd beaten the Lawsons tonight, but that family were cockroaches and could choose to get their own back while he was alone. It was a relief when he reached his street. He could hear the shouting emanating from his house as soon as he turned the corner. His front door opened, and a startled-looking man scuttled down the path,
shoes in one hand, jacket in the other. A buxom blonde with beefy forearms chased him down the path, hurling insults at him and slapping him about the head. "Go on, piss off, you manky wee jobby," she yelled after him. "You come into my house thinking you can give me a load of shite in my own living room? Well, you're about to feel the wrath, you fucking fanny." Jamie grinned as the terrified man raced past him out the garden gate and disappeared down the street, not even daring to stop to put on his shoes. "I take it your date didn't go well then?" he asked his mum. "No, it did not," replied Jackie. "It started off well enough. He took me out to a decent restaurant, but in typical man fashion, he thought he was going to get a reward for buying me scampi and chips, the miserable wee scrotum." She took a deep, calming breath, brushing her wispy blonde hair out of her eyes. "I'm considering going gay. At least I might find someone whose feet don't stink and who tidies up after themselves. Why is it every man I meet is a dirty bastard?" "From what I've found, women are just as much hard work." "Probably. I couldn't stand another gobby cow like me." Jamie grinned and linked his arm through hers. "Come on, Ma. Let's grab a brew." "OK, sweetheart," she smiled, the last of her annoyance vanishing. Jackie Gray's temper was phenomenal, but fortunately, it was also fleeting and rarely bestowed upon her children. They only felt her wrath when they'd seriously messed up. They stepped into the light and warmth of their small but impeccably clean home. Jamie was very grateful for his mum's housekeeping skills. She took all the work upon herself. He knew how lucky he was in comparison to Logan and Gary. Digger's mum, though, was just as conscientious as his own. Jackie's eyes widened when she saw the state of her son's knuckles. "Oh, Jesus," she said, grabbing his left hand and pulling it towards her to examine it. "You've been fighting again, haven't you?" "It was nothing," he mumbled, pulling his hand out of her grip. "Don't give me that old shite. What happened?" He sighed, knowing she wouldn't stop until he told her everything. "It was the Lawsons. They needed putting in their fucking place." "For God's sake, Jamie, don't we have enough on our plates without you starting World War III? That lot have more bloody cousins than the royal family. They'll come back with bigger numbers. Then where will you be?" "They won't. Not after what we did to them." She grabbed him by both shoulders, fingers digging into his skin, green eyes wide and pain-filled. Jackie was stocky. She didn't look after her health, and her hard life was etched into her face. But her eyes were beautiful, full of life and spirit. "Please don't tell me you used a knife, Jamie. Don't you fucking tell me that." "Ow, Ma, that hurts." "Sorry," she said, taking a deep breath and releasing him. "Of course I didn't use a blade. You know I don't carry one." "What about Digger? I know all about his fetish for the old razor gangs." "He wasn't carrying either. None of us were, and neither were the Lawsons. We just used fists and feet. Although I did have my bike chain." He knew he'd get away with that because he'd used one for years. He was famous for it. Jackie nodded and ran a shaky hand down her face. "That's all right then." Her fear of knives was deeply ingrained. 15 years ago, she'd seen her younger brother stabbed to death in the street in a stupid argument over a packet of cigarettes. His killer was serving life in Barlinnie, but the trauma had never left her. She could cope with the fact that her son got into regular fights. On this estate, it was vital you could take care of yourself, otherwise you became a target. But she was terrified her son would one day share his uncle's fate, or his attackers. Jamie wrapped an arm around her. "You know I wouldn't do anything like that."
You'd better mean that, Jamie. I do, honest. Good. She shoved down her fear and forced a smile. If you weren't here, who'd unblock the toilet? It's good to be needed, he grinned. The humour fled from Jackie's eyes. Was this fight down to that fat lazy bastard Dave McVitie? Well, we did get his opinion about the hassle we've been getting from the Lawsons. And let me guess, the Moran told you to kick 7 bells out of them before they did the same to you. Aye, he sighed. He did. Violence is his answer to everything. He booed his postie in the boss because he creased one of his letters and he got fired from his job at the factory for stuffing his boss into a locker. That's why he's not had a job for the last 5 years. So he just sits around at home like the slug he is, getting poor Logan to run around after him. You and your friends treat him like he's bloody Wellington, when actually he's a thick, useless lump of lard who keeps his brains in his fat arse. He's given us useful tips. If he has, it's only by accident. I went to school with a prick. He was thick then too. He thought New Zealand was the capital of Australia. Jamie chuckled and shook his head. You've got to stop treating him like he's Lord God Almighty. You're only setting yourself up for a fall. We don't listen to everything he says, mumbled Jamie. You shouldn't listen to anything he says. Bugger, Charlie's awake now, she said, when there came the sound of someone calling her from upstairs. Jamie was incredibly grateful to his younger brother for interrupting. You see to him, and I'll stick the kettle on. OK. Thanks, love, she said. You're a good boy, Jamie, despite what you'd have everyone believe. And don't forget to clean your bike chain. I won't. He smiled as he watched her head upstairs to tend to her youngest child. They were a one-parent family too, like Logan's. 8 years ago, his alcoholic father had run off with what little money they had, as well as everything they possessed that was worth a few quid, which wasn't much. They hadn't seen or heard from him since. None of them were particularly devastated by this. In fact, they'd been significantly better off without him as he'd drunk what money they got. Not only did they have a bit more cash now, but they weren't disturbed by his drunken ravings or perpetual sweaty odour. After setting the kettle to boil, Jamie filled the sink with hot soapy water and began scrubbing his bike chain, the clear water turning pink. When he was sure he'd got all the blood off, he set it down outside the kitchen door to dry. Jackie returned downstairs just as Jamie was pouring out the tea. Is Charlie okay? He asked her. Fine. He had a nightmare about that creepy wee cow out of that film. You know, that lassie with her hair covering her face. Jamie puzzled over this statement before realisation struck. Oh, you mean The Ring? The horror film? Aye. I don't know what the fuss is all about. If she'd been my kid, I'd have slapped the spooky right out of her. I think the plot's a little more complicated than antisocial behaviour, said Jamie, wryly. I'll never let Sarah bloody McCulloch babysit again. Fancy letting a 10-year-old watch a film like that. She's always been a daft bint. Here you go, Ma, he said, handing her a mug of tea. Ta, she said, taking it from him. She winced at the sight of his hands. What will Malcolm say about those cuts when you go into work tomorrow? I don't care. I hate that bloody shop. It's a job, Jamie, and there's precious few of those about, especially in Gallowburn, so don't mess it up. I won't, he mumbled. But I won't be doing crap like that for the rest of my life. One day I'll be somebody. I know you will, son. If anyone can make it, you can. Jamie positively beamed at his mum. She'd always had faith in him. His smile was seldom seen. His hard face and dark eyes rarely displaying any good humour, but he always had a ready smile for his mum, who would fight Satan himself to defend her children. Jackie poured some of the hot water from the kettle into a bowl, added a bit of cold, and used it to bathe his hands. "At least you haven't come home with a tooth sticking out of your knuckles this time," she said. "Ian Rushmore's still got the gap in his teeth," he replied, dark eyes flashing with pleasure at the memory of punching that walloper in the face. "He's too lazy to bother going to the dentist." "More like he can't afford it. His family's skint." Jamie shrugged. "Not my problem." Jackie tutted as she applied antiseptic cream to his cuts. "Just try and stay out of trouble for a while. Please, Jamie." "I'll do my best, but we have to defend ourselves. If we hadn't done what we did tonight, the Lawsons would have taken over." "Taken over what? You don't own this scheme." "The north side of the estate is still our territory, and if we'd backed down, those animals would have made all our lives a misery. They should stay on the south side, where they belong." "South side?" muttered Jackie. "We're not in bloody Los Angeles. You all need more to occupy your time. Then you wouldn't be fighting every 5 minutes. Too much spare time and too much testosterone." "You're probably right, Ma." He smiled. Jackie couldn't help but smile back when her son's eyes twinkled. He was so serious all the time that it was a relief to see. "There," she said, when she'd finished tending to his hands. "They shouldn't get infected. Now get yourself to bed. You've got to be up for work in 5 hours." "No problem. You know I don't need much sleep. It's a good job with the hours you keep. Away you go then, and don't wake Charlie." "I won't." He kissed her cheek. "Night, Ma." "Night, sweetheart." Jackie watched him go, worry niggling at her. She'd always known Jamie would wind up getting involved with the local gang culture. He'd come out of the womb fighting. But she could see the effect it was having on him. She was afraid one day he'd retreat from her entirely. It was all that silly sod Dave McVitie's fault, acting Fagin with the boys, thinking he was some great leader. Well, she'd be having words with that bastard tomorrow. The general was going to find himself being demoted. Jackie's eyes narrowed with pleasure at the thought. Chapter 2. Jamie ambled down the garden path miserably, backpack slung over one shoulder. Logan sat in his car at the curb, waiting for him. His friend drove a beige Dacia Logan MCV, the name proudly emblazoned across the back. Logan always joked it was the closest he'd ever get to having a private registration. As the shop Jamie worked at was barely a 5-minute walk from Logan's work in the neighbouring suburb of Baillieston, he gave him a lift in each morning. "Come on, shift your arse," Logan called to him through the open window. "I've got to be at work soon." He worked in a call centre for a mobile phone provider and loathed his job as much as Jamie loathed his. Jamie tossed his bag into the back seat and climbed into the front with his friend. "Christ, you look miserable," said Logan as he set off down the street. "What's up with you?" "I hate my job. It's shit." "I feel your pain. I hate working at the call centre." "Yeah, but you're part-time. I'm stuck in that crap hole 40 hours a week." "It's only temporary. One day you'll have so much cash you won't need to work." "Oh, aye. A lottery win, I suppose." "You never know. We're small time now, but one day we could be big." "You mean the Blood Brothers?" "Aye. How no?" "Because all we do is scrap with arseholes. We're not a Colombian drug cartel." "I don't necessarily mean drugs. That shite's dangerous. Too many people get done in arguing about who's got the right to deal around here. There are other ways. trailed off Logan, thinking of the phone he'd taken off John Lawson, which was in his pocket. Like what? I don't know, but we'll figure something out. If anyone can, you can, pal. I can't do it alone. We'll do it together. Sooner rather than later, he sighed. Anyway, my ma saw the cuts on my hands from last night, and she's blaming your da for it. Good. Hope she kicks the crap out of him again. Jamie frowned at his friend. Something wrong? He made me cook him a fry-up last night at 1 o'clock in the morning. You should have told him to piss off. He can't give you a whack anymore. I know, but he's my da. Is that all that's bothering you? Frowned Jamie. He'd known Logan his entire life, so he could tell he wasn't giving him the whole truth. John Lawson's phone felt to be burning a hole in his pocket. No, nothing. Ignore me. I'm tired after last night. I didn't get to bed until about 3. Jamie wasn't convinced by this excuse, but he decided to let it drop. Logan would tell him when he was ready. The rest of the journey passed in silence, Logan lost in thoughts about the phone, and Jamie dreading the day ahead while staring out of the window at the Gallowburn whizzing by, which, in his opinion, was when it looked most attractive. Gallowburn had started out as a housing estate, but over the 6 decades of its existence, it had evolved into so much more, and now was a suburb of Glasgow in its own right, 12 kilometres square, containing shops, cafes, offices, and even a couple of factories, all circling the scheme. It sat squat and sinister in the centre of the retail district. Logan dropped him off outside the shop where he'd worked for the last 7 months. Jamie stared up at its tattered, peeling frontage, lip curling at the tacky crap in the window, cheap makeup, a wide selection of hideous ornaments, unheard of brands of cat food and toilet seats. Surprisingly, the shop did pretty well. It was amazing what utter shite people were willing to buy. But that didn't stop the owner, Malcolm, from being a miserly bastard. He'd only hired Jamie because his wife had busted her knee carrying too many boxes and had been unable to work since. Now, he piled the weight of all those boxes onto Jamie's wiry shoulders. The only plus side to his job was that it had made him physically strong, and he'd developed muscles where none had existed before. When he saw Malcolm frowning at him through the window and pointing at his watch, he sighed again. Shoulders slumped as he headed inside. He was fucked if this was going to be his life for much longer.
"What were you doing dawdling out there on the pavement?"
demanded Malcolm. With his thin, lanky body, stooped shoulders and mass of wiry hair, he looked like a praying mantis with the head of a llama. He was the weirdest-looking individual Jamie had ever seen. "I had a rough night last night," muttered Jamie. Malcolm frowned at his knuckles.
"So I see. Can't say I'm surprised, living on that scheme. Every single day must be a fight."
"Something like that?"
"Well, don't just stand there. We've got a lot to do today. We're swapping the air fresheners over with the toilet cleaners. It'll give the shop a whole new lease of life."
"Thrilling," said Jamie, flatly. Malcolm's enthusiasm for the task only making the situation even more depressing. He headed into the tiny room at the back of the shop where he dumped his bag and coat and donned the dreaded dark blue overall Malcolm insisted he wear, which fastened up at the front, hung down to his knees, and was 3 sizes too big. Jamie had to clear the air fresheners off the shelf while Malcolm tackled the toilet cleaners with gusto. Jamie thought it pathetic that this shop was the older man's entire world and where he was happiest. He'd rather shoot himself in the head than live like that. Once everything was off the shelves, Malcolm received a phone call from his wife, demanding to know where he was, as he was supposed to take her to hospital for an appointment about her knee.
Are you sure you'll be okay on your own?
Malcolm asked Jamie anxiously, once he'd hung up, ears buzzing from the tongue-lashing he'd been given. I'll be fine, don't worry, Jamie replied, delighted at the prospect of being rid of him for a while. You'd better get going. Linda needs you.
Aye, but what if you get 2 or 3 customers in the shop at once?
I can cope. You better go before she misses her appointment. With the NHS the way it is, she may have a long wait for another, and that will piss her off even more. This decided him.
Aye, you're right. She already blames me for busting her knee in the first place. I don't want to make it worse. Carry on putting all this back on the shelves.
I'm on it. Don't worry. Reluctantly, Malcolm left, continually looking back over his shoulder, as though he was anxious Jamie would burn the entire place down in his absence. Thank God for that, muttered Jamie when he'd gone. He decided to sod the air fresheners and toilet cleaners and wandered into the back room to make a brew. He'd only just switched on the kettle when he heard the bell go, indicating they had a customer. For fuck's sake, he muttered, heading back into the shop. For once, it didn't smell like candles and mustiness, the usual stink overpowered by the pleasing scent of coconut, sending a craving for sun and sand surging through him. He'd never been abroad, and his mum hadn't been able to afford a holiday in years. The scent emanated from a customer standing at the shelves that held the vape refills. However, this wasn't the shop's usual customer. Long, blonde, glossy hair hung down her back. Her cream blouse and short, dusky pink skirt clung to a voluptuous body. The high heels were expensive, and the handbag slung over her shoulder was undoubtedly designer. However, the most notable thing about her was the fact that she was stuffing the vape refills into her handbag as though her life depended on it. He might loathe the shop, but he refused to let anyone take the piss while he was in charge. "Oi," he said, "what the fuck do you think you're—" Jamie trailed off when the customer turned around. Wide blue eyes looked back out of a delicately beautiful face, the skin flawless, lips painted ruby red. Those lovely lips crooked into a smile, derision filling her eyes as she looked him up and down. "Nice jacket. How many of you are in there?" "Just me," he murmured. He'd never seen anyone so beautiful or classy before. "Looks like you could get 3 people in that jacket, which could be a lot of fun." With that, she turned her back on him and shoved more refills into her bag. "What are you doing?" he said. "I saw that llama leave, so I thought I'd take my chance." "Chance to do what?" "Duh. Nick these, of course," she said, holding out a handful of refills before stuffing those into her bag too. "Why do you want all those? Are you going to sell them?" No. I'm trying to quit smoking. Are you thick or something?" Jamie's pride shook him out of his shock. "Don't talk to me like that, you cheeky cow." "Cheeky cow, am I?" she replied, unconcerned. "You're probably right. That's what everyone else says I am, but I always have my reasons." "You look coined up. You can pay for them." "But I don't want to pay for them. I came in here yesterday for a couple of these, and that scrawny prick who just left shortchanged me. When I told him what he'd done, he went mental at me and told me to piss off." "Oh, aye," said Jamie, folding his arms across his chest. "And how did you tell him?" "I asked him if his maw kicked him in the eyes with her hooves when she spat him out of her fanny." Jamie forced himself not to laugh. He'd had to restrain himself many times from calling that walloper names. "I'm no surprised he chucked you out. If you said that to me,
I would have thrown you through the window." "Oh, really?" she laughed, eyeing his skinny frame. "I'm a lot stronger than I look." "I'll bet you are. You've got beautiful eyes, all dark and threatening." She spotted the cuts on his hands and smiled. "Someone's been up to something naughty. I like that." "You do?" "I do. You're dangerous, aren't you?" "Actually, that name suits you," she said, before taking another handful of refills. "Aye," he said, snatching them from her. "You're not taking the piss while I'm in charge. You put the lot back." She hitched her handbag up her shoulder. "Make me dangerous." "Don't think I won't just because you're a woman." "Go on then." "Aye!" she exclaimed when he wrenched the bag off her shoulder. "Give that back." "No," he retorted, tipping the contents out all over the countertop. "Looks like the painters are in." He grinned when a box of tampons fell out last, landing on the heap of vape refills. "That's none of your business," she snarled, snatching it up. "How much were you shortchanged by?" "What do you care?" "Just answer the question." She huffed. £4. "All right, you can take one refill. They're $3.99, so that's most of it back." "What are you doing?" she said, when he rooted around in his jeans pocket. "Getting you the penny. Then you're all squared up." "You can stick your penny right up your skinny little arse." "The clothes and handbag are classy. It's a shame your gob spoils them." "You cheeky little sot," she hissed, snatching up one of the refills and stalking to the door. "You've not heard the last of this." "Gonna get your rich daddy to give me a spanking, are you, princess?" "I'm perfectly capable of spanking your ass myself. Your bum will be black and blue by the time I'm done." "I'm game if you are, princess." With a growl of rage, she stamped her high-heeled foot and flounced out, slamming the door shut behind her. Jamie stood at the window to watch her storm across the road towards a convertible light blue BMW. Just as he thought, coined up. She jumped in and slammed the door shut. When she saw him watching her, she gave him the V sign, started the engine, and sped off down the street, forcing an elderly man crossing the road to reel backwards. With a screech of tires, she disappeared around the corner and was gone. "Well, that livened up the day," Jamie murmured to himself. Even though she was obviously nuts, he wished she'd come back. She might make the day go quicker. He slinked over to the pile of vape refills and began neatly stacking them back on the shelf. The annoyance of her adding to his workload was tempered by the sweet aroma of coconut she'd left behind. As Jackie walked her younger son Charlie to school, her mood darkened with each step. Dave fucking McFitty was leading her son down a path to self-destruction, and she was buggered if she was going to allow it. Jamie had a good head on his shoulders. He had a chance to make something of himself, and that lard arse was not going to steal that from him. Well, as soon as she dropped Charlie off, she was going to see Dave and ensure he never went near her eldest boy again. "Ma?" said a voice, disturbing her thoughts. "Ma?" Jackie shook herself out of it and smiled down at the little dark-haired boy gazing up at her. He had dark eyes just like his older brother, but whereas Jamie's were always hard and brooding, Charlie's were wide and soft. Even though he was being raised on the Gallowburn, he was still naive and gentle, the opposite of his brother. Jackie had never intended to have a second child, especially not with Jason, her violent, drunken bastard of a husband. He'd inflicted enough misery on one child, and she was buggered if she was going to let him do it to a second. When she'd found out she was pregnant again, she had intended to get an abortion without telling Jason. She'd even walked into the clinic,
but she'd been unable to go through with it, and it was the best decision she'd ever made. That day, she resolved Jason would never lay a hand on herself or Jamie ever again, and he would certainly not touch the new baby. She'd passed this message on to Jason by waiting until he was in a drunken stupor on the couch, straddling him and holding a butcher's knife to his throat. After breaking the news about her pregnancy, she made it very clear that if he thought he could continue to abuse them all, then she would slit him open from his tiny privates to his big empty head and laugh while she did it. Even now, the memory of the fear in his eyes made her smile. The pathetic bastard had even wet himself. She'd made him clean the piss out of the cushions, standing over him brandishing the knife while he'd frantically scrubbed, casting fearful glances at her over his shoulder. For years, she'd lived in terror of him, and in that moment, she'd learnt that he was actually an incredibly weak excuse for a man, only able to feel powerful when he was bullying others. From that day on, she'd never taken any shit off anybody ever again. The doormat had died that day, and good bloody riddance. Jason had pissed off when Charlie was 2, and good bloody riddance to that too. Now Dave McVitie thought he could control her son just like Jason had tried too. Well, he was about to get a harsh life lesson. She kissed Charlie goodbye and watched him meet up with one of his friends as he walked inside the school. Last year, a couple of boys in his class thought they could start bullying him, but after what Jamie had done to their older brothers, they hadn't gone near him since. Neither had any of the other bullies in the school, for that matter. It was one less thing to worry about. Only once Charlie was safely inside the building did she head back the way she'd come, her anger growing with every step. When Tricia, a good friend of hers, attempted to stop her to chat, she brushed her off with a curt apology. Tricia didn't argue. She knew better than to mess with Jackie Gray when she was in one of her moods. Jackie was always wondering where Jamie got his temper from. She was the only one who failed to realise he'd inherited it from her. Jackie banged both fists on Dave McVitie's peeling front door, breathing furiously. When there was no answer, she banged on it again and gave it a kick for good measure, but still nothing. Movement to her left caught her eye, and she spied Dave's sweaty moon face peering at her through the window. When he realised he'd been spotted, his eyes widened, and he ducked out of sight. "I know you're in there, you spineless jobby!" she yelled. "Open the door and face me like a man!" Still, there was no response. She tried the door handle, but it refused to open, and she grunted with rage. "You're no corrupting my boy, do you hear me, Dave McVitie? I'll see you dead before I let him turn out like you. This isn't over," she added, giving the door another hard kick, chipping off more of the decaying red paintwork before stomping down the path, pausing to kick over the disintegrating wishing well in the middle of the garden. She stormed down the street, still full of rage and the need for righteous justice. Once she was out of sight of the McVitie homestead, she darted around the corner of the house on the end and headed down the back street. When Dave's back gate opened, she pressed herself against the wall. Sure enough, the fat, sweaty lump emerged wrapped in a grey anorak. As he was concentrating so hard on trying to close the gate as quietly as possible, he failed to see her standing there. If Jackie hadn't been so angry, she would have found it funny. She stuck out her foot, and he went flying, landing face down on the cobbles. Before he could rise, she planted her foot in between his shoulder blades, pinning him to the ground. "Jackie, that's got to be you," he cried, as he ineffectually thrashed. "Damn right it's me, Davy boy." "What the fuck are you doing? Have you finally lost the plot?" My boy got into another fight last night, and it's all your fault.
It was nothing to do with me.
Don't lie to me, you asshole. You told him and his friends to defend their territory by attacking the Lawsons, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I swear to God.
One day, Dave McVitie, you'll be struck by lightning for the number of lies you tell in God's name. You'll be fried like the fat piggy you are, she said, pressing down harder with her foot.
They do have minds of their own, you know, he said, flopping about in his belly, but Jackie's foot was immovable. If you want someone to blame for that fight, blame the boys, no me.
I know what you're up to, acting the Fagin with them.
What's a Fagin?
You never did like to read, did you, Davy? Fagin is a character out of Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens who runs a gang of thieving wains.
The boys are no thieving wains. They're grown men, but you can't accept it because you want to keep your boy a baby. Now, are you going to let me up, you mad cow?
Not yet, she said, pressing harder.
Ow! He cried. That fucking hurts.
Good. Now listen to me, Dave McVitie. You stay away from my boy. If I find out that you've been giving him more of your shite advice, I'll come back and take your wee willy winky right off. Do you understand me?
Aye, I understand, he cried. Can I get up now?
Jackie removed her foot. On you go then. Slowly, Dave pushed himself up onto all fours, wincing at the ache in his lower back. It took him another minute to drag himself to his feet. He was appalled to see a crowd had gathered at the end of the street to watch his disgrace. Anger sparked through him, and he took an aggressive step towards Jackie.
See you, Jackie Gray. You've gone too far.
Oh, aye, fat boy. And what are you going to do about it?
I'm going to give you the hiding you've been asking for a long time.
Jackie delved into her handbag and produced a bike chain, holding it by one end so he could see the length and viciousness of it. Just the sight of it made him turn white. This is my Jamie's, she said. It's his favourite weapon, and that's all thanks to you. I believe you recommended it to him. Well, it's about to have another victim. Brace yourself, Davy boy, she said, drawing it back. This is gonna hurt.
Just calm down, Hen,
cried Dave, holding out his hands and stumbling backwards. Don't tell me to calm down, she yelled, lashing out with the chain and missing, just brushing Dave's right arm. Stand still, you coward, and take what's coming to you.
Help! She's gone off her nut,
cried Dave, running away. Get back here, you wobbly fucking jelly, she bellowed, making chase. She slowed to a halt when Dave vanished around the corner, running faster than he'd ever moved in his life. While the assembled crowd burst out laughing, Jackie glared after his retreating form. She'd put the shits right up him, but she knew it wasn't enough to stop him from negatively influencing her boy. Back to the drawing board. She needed to come up with something that would keep him away permanently. Malcolm returned to the shop 2 hours later and sent Jamie out for an early lunch. Fortunately, he had the vape refills, air fresheners and toilet cleaners alike stacked back on the shelves, so Malcolm didn't give him a hard time. Jamie bought a sandwich, a packet of crisps and a can of iron brew from the bakery down the road and ambled through the shopping precinct as he ate. Despite the springtime chill hanging in the air, he wanted to be outside to get the musty smell of the shop out of his nostrils. Malcolm could easily afford to have the place renovated and make it look like it didn't belong in a third world country, but he was too bloody tight. "All right, dangerous," said a sultry voice. A frowning Jamie spun on his heel to see the mad blonde from the shop leaning against her BMW, which was parked at the curb. Oh, God, he said. "No, you again." "I was hoping to bump into you. I knew the llama would have to let you out at some point." "Have you been hanging around here waiting for me?" "I have." "That's a bit weird." "I didn't have anything else to do." "No work for you, eh, princess?" "Something like that." "Let's go shopping." "I don't want to go shopping." "I don't care, because you're going," she said, linking her arm through his. Jamie was so shocked he didn't protest, and allowed himself to be half led, half dragged down the street. "You're off your head," he told her. "I just know what I want, and I always get it," she replied. "You're no getting me," he said, shrugging his arm free. She grabbed hold of his arm again and hung on tighter. "You're so tense. You need to unwind. Come on, it'll be fun." For the first time in his life, Jamie had no idea what to do. He'd never encountered anyone like her before, and the next thing he knew, she'd pulled him into a shop selling makeup, toiletries and perfume. "Christ, I hope no one I know sees me in here," he muttered. "Don't worry. You can tell them you were buying your girlfriend a present." "I don't have a girlfriend." "You do now." "What? You? You must be joking." "Why not? What's wrong with me?" she said, glancing around before slipping a blusher brush into her handbag. "Put that back, right now," he hissed at her. "What's your problem?" "You're gonna get us both lifted," he whispered, looking around to see if they were being watched, but the two assistants were deep in conversation. "Relax, will you? I spend a lot of money in this shop, so I'm entitled to a freebie now and then." "That's 2 freebies," he glowered when a mascara wand joined the blusher brush in her handbag. "If you don't keep your voice down, I'll tell them you're a shoplifter." "I haven't nicked anything." "Then how did that lipstick get in your pocket?" Jamie's eyes widened when he touched his left jacket pocket and felt a lump there. "How the hell did you do that?" "I'm good, aren't I?" she smiled. "Don't you dare nick that too," he whispered when she picked up a bottle of makeup remover. "I don't intend to. This is what I came in for." He sighed with relief when she walked towards the till, marvelling at her nerve as she beamed at the two assistants, who smiled back at her. While the madwoman wasn't looking, he took the lipstick out of his pocket and dumped it back on the shelf. Keeping his head down, he headed out of the shop and walked away as fast as his long-legged stride would take him. It was tempting to break into a run, but he thought that might look suspicious. He sighed when he heard high heels hurrying to catch up. "Oi!" she called after him. "Where are you going?" "Away from you," he retorted. "You're mental." She quickly caught him up, which was a miracle given how high her heels were. "I get bored easily," she said. "That's all." "You're no dragging me into your games, princess." "My name is Allegra," she retorted. Jamie sniggered. "After the car? Were you conceived in a Vauxhall?" "No one in my family would be seen dead in a Vauxhall. What's your name, Dangerous?" "I'm not telling you." "You don't need to. I already know it's Jamie." He came to a halt and rounded on her. "How do you know that?" "I was passing the shop where you work a few days ago, and I saw you in there. I thought, wow, he's incredible. So I asked the woman who works in the shop next to yours selling all that knitted crap about you, and she was very happy to oblige, for a few quid. When I went in for the vape, it was to talk to you, but you weren't there. That dumb llama was, though." She frowned. "You think I'm incredible?" he said with a suspicious frown. "I do," she said, holding her head high. "Why?" "You look like a young Robert De Niro. He's my favourite actor," she said with a dreamy sigh. "Even though he's 76, he's still sexy, don't you think?"
"Funnily enough, no," he retorted.
"Plus, you're dangerous," she purred. "And that's what I like."
Suspicion filled his hard eyes. "Gary put you up to this, didn't he? This is just the sort of wind-up he loves to pull."
"Who's Gary? Oh, do you have a brother?" she replied, attempting to slide her arms around his neck. He took her by the shoulders and gently pushed her away.
"You can tell that fat dick, nice try, but I'm no falling for it."
"I'm not kidding."
"Aye, right," he said, as he walked away, leaving her standing on the pavement. "This isn't over," she called after him. "Yes, it is," he called back over his shoulder, leaving her to stomp her high heel in anger. Chapter 3.
Logan had been so consumed with thoughts about the phone he'd nicked off John Lawson that he accidentally hung up on 2 callers and mixed up 2 accounts. As he was usually such a conscientious worker, his manager let him off with a gentle warning, but he had to get his act together. As much as he hated his job, he needed it. Finally, lunchtime came around, and he hurried out of the building to his car. He drove to his friend Mark's house, which was barely 10 minutes from the call centre. The route took him past Jamie's place of work, and he saw his friend arguing with a rather stunning blonde on the pavement. He was tempted to stop and find out what was going on, but the phone was his most pressing matter. He just hoped Mark could help him access it, and that John hadn't reported it stolen. As it was a cheap pay-as-you-go model, containing sensitive information, he guessed John wouldn't want anyone finding out about it. He would be much more likely to try and retrieve it himself, which worried him, especially as his dad had said he couldn't tell his friends. Without their backup, he'd be vulnerable. He arrived at Mark's house, which was even smaller and more depressing than his own. He got out of the car to the sound of barking. "Oh, great," he muttered, when he saw Mark's white Akita Stalin at the window, teeth bared and growling at him. "That bastard hates me." As he approached the front door, Stalin started barking, bright blue eyes diabolical. "Shut the fuck up!" he heard a voice yell from inside. Immediately, the barking ceased. The door was yanked open, and Logan grimaced. "Jesus, Mark, put on some pants." His friend scratched his bare chest, fag hanging out of his mouth, naked white chicken legs sticking out of his black and white spotted boxer shorts. "What do you think you're doing coming round here so early?" "Early? It's 1:45. "In the day?" "Well, yeah, friend Logan. Why do you think it's daylight?" Mark took the cigarette out of his mouth and dragged a hand through his ruffled dark hair. "What do you want?" Logan took the phone out of his pocket. "I need you to unlock this for me." "You got the cash?" He nodded. "How much?" 20 quid. "You got me out of bed for 20 fucking quid?" "Oh, come on, Mark. I've seen you do it before. It only takes you 5 minutes." "Suppose. All right, come on in then." Logan entered and closed the door behind him. Stalin bounded into the hallway, making him back up against the door in fear as the dog growled at him. "Stalin! Kitchen! Now!" yelled Mark. The dog gave Logan one last glower before slinking off into the kitchen, leaving him to breathe a sigh of relief. He followed Mark upstairs to a bedroom that contained only a single bed and a desk holding a laptop. As there wasn't enough room to get a chair between the bed and the desk, they both perched on the edge of the bed. Mark switched on the computer, and Logan held the phone out to him. "Is it nicked?" Mark asked him. Logan nodded. "Then I'm no touching it." Connected to this, he said, picking up a data cable which was plugged into the side of the laptop. Logan connected it and sat back to watch his friend work. Mark was the laziest bastard he knew, but his tech knowledge was phenomenal, and he made a good living doing jobs for people who like to keep their activities quiet. Best of all, he never asked for details. As far as he was concerned, where the items he worked on had come from was none of his business. Stalin nudged open the door with his nose and launched himself at Logan, knocking him back onto the bed and pinning him down. When Stalin's jaws clamped down on his arm, Logan released a cry of terror, even though the dog's teeth thankfully didn't break the skin. "Relax, he's only playing," Mark told a frantically writhing Logan, not taking his eyes off the screen. "He won't hurt you." "Get him off me, man!" he cried, trying to bring up his legs so he could push Stalin away with his feet, but the dog was giving him no respite. "You'll get bored in a minute and bugger off back downstairs." "Taking my arm with him!" Logan exclaimed. "For Christ's sake, he's only messing. Have you never had a dog?" "No, I don't like them. Get him off me, Mark, now!" Mark tutted. "Fine. Stalin, piss off into the kitchen." The dog immediately released Logan and happily bounded out of the room, pleased he'd asserted dominance over the newcomer. Logan slowly sat up, dazed and shaken. He examined his arm, but there was no damage. His jacket, however, was a different matter. "There's teeth marks in my sleeve, and he's covered me in slappers." He sniffed at the drool staining his jacket and grimaced. "Jesus, his breath stinks. What do you feed him?" "Whiny wee babies like you, that's what," said Mark. "I smell, and I've got to go back to work." "Not my problem." "Right, all done. You can take your phone." "Nice one," said Logan, removing the data cable and picking up the phone. He swiped at the screen and smiled when the home screen popped up. "Give me the cash," said Mark. Logan pulled the £20 note out of his pocket and dumped it in his hand. "Cheers, pal." Logan followed Mark downstairs, refusing to go first in case Stalin was lurking at the bottom, which he was. When he saw his master was leading the way, Logan could swear he looked disappointed. "Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it. You can go back to bed." "No, I'm up now. I may as well have some breakfast." He sighed, as though terribly put upon. "I've got to get back to work. See you around." "Aye, bye." Just as Logan was going out the door, Stalin made one last lunge for him, Mark making no effort to restrain the dog. Logan staggered out backwards, stumbling down the single step into the garden, yanking the door shut before Stalin could follow. He frowned when he heard Mark's laughter on the other side of the door. Logan sniffed his arm again and winced. He was honking, which wasn't a good thing to be when you worked in a warm office. He got back in his car to examine the phone. Sure enough, the phone numbers his dad wanted were on there, which he made a note of on his own phone, typing them into his contact list. As he was due back at work in 10 minutes, there wasn't enough time to examine the rest of the contents. That would have to wait until later. Jamie kept watch at the shop window for the rest of the day.